You're with the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for staying with us. Wetlands and ecologically unique and diverse environments that are sometimes referred to as Earth's kidneys. The wetlands are referred to as Earth's kidneys. This is because of the function they serve, filtering pollutants out of the water that flows through them. Northern Ohio has many important wetlands areas, stretching from around the Maumee River in the northwest part of the state to areas around the Cuyahoga River in our national park, to the coastal wetlands that butt up against Lake Erie. State funding has been allocated to both study and protect these ecosystems through the statewide H2 Ohio program. In Northeast Ohio specifically, the Ohio Lake Erie Commission has awarded $750,000 to the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. This is to continue restoring the Menor Marsh State Nature Preserve. We'll spend the rest of the show today talking about the wetlands in our region. With me in studio, we have Dr. David Kryska. He's a restoration ecologist at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. David, thanks for being with us here today.
Great to be here.
We appreciate it. Joining us by video call, we have Meredith Tien. She's a naturalist with the Medina County Park District. Hi, Meredith.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And finally, we have Dr. Lauren Kinsman-Costello calling in. She's an associate professor at Kent State University and also works as the lead wetland monitoring researcher at the state's H2 Ohio program. Lauren, thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
If you want to be part of the conversation, you can call us at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a note on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Now, David, quite simply, basic level, what's a wetland? How would I know if I came upon one?
Good question. So a wetland is where you have just standing water, and sometimes you have trees growing out of the water. Sometimes you have what we call emergent plants, just plants just growing right out of the water. And it's sort of this perfect convergence of having those plants and animals that can survive in that environment.
Okay.
And so if you walked on it, you might hear insects, you might hear frogs calling. Those are some of the good giveaways. You might hear different kind of birds, red-winged blackbirds. They're really unique places, pretty special.
Does a wetland have to come up against water, or can it exist with just kind of the water that's in it? Does it have to come against a standing body of water that's not part of the wetlands, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, sometimes that's what's kind of unique about wetlands. Sometimes they're on the edge of like lakes. Sometimes they're all by themselves, called standalone wetlands. Sometimes they're moving water, like the Everglades. We might think of that big system. That water is just a slow, thin film of moving water.
Okay, so a lot of variety there. Lauren, what are some of the largest wetlands here in Northeast Ohio?
Some of the largest complexes in Northeast Ohio, you'll see a lot, like you mentioned, along rivers like the Cuyahoga River and along Lake Erie. In Northwest Ohio, was once one of the largest wetland complexes in the whole country. It was called the Great Black Swamp. So it was on par with the whole Northwest Ohio region was one gigantic wetland.
I'll ask the entire group to weigh in on this, but I'll start with Meredith. Meredith, can you tell us about the role that wetlands play in our region, in our larger ecosystem, how important they are and what purpose they serve?
Yeah, so wetlands serve quite a lot of different purposes. They serve as a nursery and protection for a lot of different types of wildlife, as well as homes for wildlife. They serve as a watering hole or a place for different wildlife to, seek out a source of water. They also, like you mentioned, act as a filter or nature's kidneys to filter out different chemicals and things out of the water. And they also serve as a kind of like a sponge where they hold water and actually can help to prevent flooding as well.
David, you're giving a bit of a nod here. Tell us a bit more about the importance of the wetlands.
Oh my gosh. So from like humans, we have to farm, right? And so our farming practices are pretty intensive when it comes to fertilizers. And where do those things go every time it rains? They go down into the wetlands. Our civilizations, like our cities, have a lot of rooftop and blacktop, and that's what we call impervious surfaces. And when that water comes down in big storm events, it's got to go somewhere. It goes down our rivers and it ends up going in the wetlands. And as she mentioned, they are kidneys. I mean, they really do. They take the impact, they filter that, they filter out the sediments that we have from agricultural practices, for example, and That's why they get that nickname, the kidneys.
Okay. Meredith, anything you'd like to add on that? Or excuse me, Lauren, I'm sorry. Lauren, anything you'd like to add on that?
No, absolutely. Wetlands are they're often called the kidneys, and that's because they can clean up so many different kinds of pollutants, including harmful nutrients that can drive algal blooms and eutrophication.
All right, we have a call now from Jim in Cleveland. Hi, Jim. Welcome to the Sound of Ideas and to our conversation about the wetlands. Jim, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really important one, especially after you're talking about birds and their migration. I would suggest, or I would love for the folks here to comment on this. You asked the question, what is a wetland? I think it's important for people to understand the implications of the recent Supreme Court ruling in Sackett versus EPA, and actually the current EPA under the Trump administration is now redoing rulemaking around what is and isn't waters in the United States. And the reason that's important is because there's a lot of wetlands that you all have been talking about that have already been knocked out of EPA Clean Water Act oversight, and it stands to be even more. So I would love for your folks to comment on what the implications are for this recent EPA rulemaking after Sackett.
Thank you for the question, Jim. Lauren, are you able to answer any of Jim's concerns there?
Yeah, absolutely. So ever since the Clean Water Act was passed, it included a provision preventing the dredging and filling of what was called waters of the United States. And that effectively has protected or served as protection for wetland systems in this country. But the precise definition of what constitutes waters of the United States has been worked out in the courts. It's gone back and forth over the decades, and the most recent decision really narrowed that definition pretty severely to only a system with a continuous surface water connection. And as you mentioned earlier, there are many wetlands that aren't directly connected to rivers or to lakes. There are many very important ephemeral wetlands. So there have been a lot of statements by scientific organizations, including ones that I'm a member of, stating clearly that that definition of wetlands doesn't align with the scientific definition of wetlands. And the rules are currently being rewritten. Some of the protections that some of these more ephemeral wetlands and things that don't meet that strict definition are being lost.
So when we talk about this, that's a potential danger to the wetlands that's being presented right now. Meredith, what other dangers might the wetlands be facing right now?
There's a lot of different things that you talk about, losing wetlands. Development is happening at an alarming rate. We have a lot of impervious surfaces that are being installed within those developments. So you've got more polluted runoff that could be coming into the existing wetlands, or you're just simply, developing over top of existing wetlands. So we're losing them at an astounding rate.
David, anything you would like to add? Anything we should be aware of in terms of protecting our wetlands?
That's a big one about those ephemeral wetlands. Ephemeral just means it's not there year round. So let's say you come in and it's dry. These are really shallow wetlands, and it's dry, and that's part of the system. And if someone were to come across that ground, and you wouldn't even think that wetland's there in that particular case. These are often forested wetlands that sometimes we call them vernal pools, and boy, they serve as a laboratory for all sorts of critters like frogs and insects. And those frogs then go out when the pool is dry, and they go out in the forest. One frog in particular called a wood frog, and it bops around in the woods, and it keeps nature in checks and balances. So it keeps those insects at bay. They go into those pools when they're wet, and they keep mosquito populations at bay, which we're all about, right? And so if the more we lose these ephemeral wetlands, the more it comes back to bite us. No pun intended.
Mm-hmm. Meredith, let's talk about some of the specific wetland areas inside the Medina Parks system. Let us know about them and also how you attract people to enjoy these areas.
Right. So we have quite a few different wetland areas, and they're all, a little bage different. So we have some ephemeral wetlands, and we have some wetlands that are connected to other bodies of water. So starting off with like our Litchfield wetlands, that is a man-made wetland, was previously a farm field that was converted into about 80 acres of wetlands. So we added things like hydric soil, aquatic plants, you know, and then the wildlife sort of was attracted to that area after the wetlands was designed and built. On the flip side of that, we have our Chippewa Lake Park, which is 330 acres of lake, natural lake, but then surrounding that natural lake, we have 118 acres of improved wetlands that affect the lake directly by, filtering out that phosphorus and the nitrogen that's coming off of farm field runoff. So we have multiple other wetlands in the parks as well. Some of them are man-made and some of them are natural. And then what we do to sort of inspire people to, come out and check out the wetlands or learn about the wetlands is, we do a lot of programming where we get people really hands-on. So we get them out there catching frogs and holding tadpoles or looking for dragonflies or, the different wildlife that's in the wetlands. So it kind of fosters that curiosity. And then hopefully it inspires them to want to learn more and to be more involved and perhaps even participating in some of our citizen science.
I don't know if the wetlands necessarily need like a PR campaign, but David, I'll ask you about this because when you say the word wetlands, you're talking about, a wet space. I'm thinking about bugs. I'm thinking about mud. Tell me how you're getting people to come enjoy these spaces.
That sounded like fun to me. I know they have such a negative connotation. Like, you think about it, when people say I'm swamped, I'm bogged down, those are different kinds of wetlands.
Right.
So this goes way back. So this is sort of in our cultural psyche, I suppose you'd say. They are such fun places. They're hotspots. They're magnets for wildlife. You can go there and you can see all sorts of animals, from the reptiles and amphibians like turtles and frogs, all sorts of different kind of birds. In that earlier program, boy, they really harbor some really unique birds, secretive marsh birds that people who love to have bird watching lists, like Chase. This is like one of their holy grail birds, sometimes they're called. We've got nesting bald eagles at these places. Mosquitoes are an issue, but mosquitoes are kind of an issue anywhere you go. They're like if you're like a kid in a candy store because there's so much wildlife to see. It's like fin, fur, feather, foliage, birds, bats, bees, bugs. They're a magnet because the water's life, right? And all these animals come to these places. So I'm happy to be the PR person for that. It's like it's one of those. Trust me. Come out on the boardwalk at like Menor Marsh and come see this place. And it comes alive. It fills our senses with all the sounds and all the sights. There's your PR.
I think I heard somewhere, and I won't say from which group or where it was from geographically in the country, but it was an indigenous people that live in cold weather, and they say there's no such thing as bad weather, there's a bad outfit. So maybe that's what we're talking about here, is you got to get your wellies on, you got to get out there in the mud, you have to enjoy all of that nature. Donna in Granger Township writes in, I am lucky enough to have a vernal pool in the woods behind my house in Medina County. It is a joy every spring to listen to the peepers and other frogs. Also, the largest swamp cottonwood tree in the state is back there, a very rare habitat in modern Ohio. Donna, thank you for sharing that with us. Lauren, I want to ask you a bit about the research and the monitoring that you're doing, and I want to remind our audience that we are talking about the wetlands here in Northeast Ohio, so if you'd like to be a part of the conversation, you can call us at 866-578-0903, or you can email us at soi@ideastream.org. Lauren is with the H2 Ohio program. So, Lauren, tell us about the data that you're looking at as you study Ohio's wetlands and some of the areas you're working in.
Yeah, absolutely. So throughout the state of Ohio since 2019, Governor Mike DeWine and the Ohio legislature has been investing in things to improve water quality, targeted mainly at those nutrients that drive the growth of harmful and unwanted algae, especially in the western basin of Lake Erie, but just generally putting lots of practices throughout the state that are going to help keep our waters healthier. And one big portion of that initiative is restoring wetlands throughout the state. And the Ohio Department of Natural Resources has restored, I think, 19,000 acres of wetlands to date under this program. But early on, they recognized that the uncertainty around how to effectively restore wetlands, especially if you're interested in one specific pollutant, which is phosphorus, That's the one most important driver of those harmful algal blooms that the H2 Ohio initiative is really focused on. And so they have contracted with a group of university researchers that I lead and coordinate to monitor wetlands throughout the state. So my team at Kent State University is going to, including the Litchfield wetland and the Chippewa Lake wetland, we've been monitoring those since they were completed in Medina County Parks, to measure what's in the water in terms of what you can't see, the invisible, like what's dissolved in the water, how much phosphorus is there, and how that water moves in and out of the wetland. Because we think of these wetlands, you can think of them kind of like a bank account. If you want them to stop phosphorus from getting into places where it can cause problems, you want more going in and less going out, just like your bank account. And so we're trying to do that budgeting. And we found that across the board, the ones we've monitored are really effective at removing phosphorus. And there's things we can do to make them even more effective if we continue to study them.
Very good news to hear that you're seeing some good positive results there, Lauren. Now, David, let's talk about the Mentor Marsh a little bit. This is stewarded by the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. That land has come back from a lot. So can you tell us a bit about the journey for the Mentor Marsh, salt waste being dumped, being ravaged, and what it's taken to get it where it is today?
Sure thing. What a journey. It's the third biggest coastal wetland along the Ohio's Lake Erie shore. And it's about 800 acres. It's nearly 4 miles long. It's a big, long, old, abandoned channel of the Grand River, which is right next door. So it's got about 12 miles of perimeter on it. So it's a pretty big wetland, you think about 12 miles. And a campaign in about 1959 to develop it into a marina and a destination came to the museum and lots of other partners, Holden Arboretum and a club named Burroughs Nature Club. They all brought it to the attention, and they all got together. And this is like mid-'60s. So Cleveland, think about it, 5th biggest city in the country, 25th biggest in the world. It was an industrial powerhouse. That development was just part of the plan there. It always was. But these people got together and did a campaign to raise money to protect a wetland, a swamp, essentially, in a time period when we really didn't do that. This is all pre-Clean Water Act, pre-Endangered Species Act, pre the US EPA even, pre-Burning River. Think about that time, a lot of pollution going on. We know about the Burning River stories, so integral to Cleveland. And so they get together and they raise hundreds of $5 donors, which is such an amazing story. You think about it, back then, people were willing to part with $5, which today is $50. So that's a big chunk of income, especially in the 60s. So they're patting themselves on the back, and lo and behold, at the same time, nearby is the Morton Salt Mine, right next to Headland State Park, and they had dug their mine shaft a few years earlier, and they had about 180 million tons of low-grade rock salt sitting on their campus. They needed to move it, put it out for bid. A contractor bought up that and dumped it into a ravine right next to Mentor Marsh, Black Brook Creek. And today, the Black Brook Audubon Society recognizes how important that was, or how important it used to be, I guess. So within 3 days, the museum's phones went off the hook that the marsh was dying. Literally, you dumped 180 million tons of low-grade rock salt, and the whole marsh died. All the plants died, all the trees died, and in jumped some invasive plants. Most notably is Phragmites. We may not know what Phragmites is, but if you drive our highways, it's that really tall grass with a big feather plume. When I say really tall, I'm like 14 feet tall. Sometimes we've seen some 24 feet tall, which is pretty amazing. So the marsh died, and by 1973, it was Phragmites as far as you could see in that 800 acres. And there was nothing we could do about it back then. So lo and behold, fast forward, the saltville gets capped. The stream gets rerouted around it so that it's not, this Black Brook Creek gets rerouted around the salt, so it's not, all that pressure from that salt coming in there is relieved. It's being redirected in one small part of the marsh. And basically, what happened after that is all these dead standing trees, perfect firebox, perfect tinderbox.
Oh.
It caught on fire multiple times. Like at least 11 large fires cost the surrounding communities $1 million just to fight all these fires. And it was kind of a running joke in the communities. They knew when, the marsh must be burning, and you knew which way the wind was blowing because 20 miles away, soot would come down. It made international news. We had museum members in South Korea that heard it on the news. And that was when we were like, oh my gosh, we've got to do something about this. It burned the museum's Wake Robin Boardwalk, and we decided to push back that Phragmites. We used brush cutters, just giant, weed whackers with a saw blade on them, because the plant is loaded with silica, so it could cut right through your boots. We pushed it back, and all these native plants came out of the soil seed bank. Like if you're a gardener and you weed, you know that the very next month there's plants coming out of that soil. That's what we call the seed bank, just that first inch of soil that has like seeds sitting in it. And that's that kind of phoenix arising from the ashes moment when we knew there was hope, that the salt had been redirected toward another part of the marsh. And so we
Give nature just that little bit of help,
yeah.
and then it will take it. It will take it to a beautiful place.
Yeah, resilience is, there's so much resilience.
Sure. We have a question in from Harmon, and Harmon writes, can someone please detail the biochemical process that removes some of the runoff pollutants? Lauren, is that something you can speak to?
Sure. Yeah. So there's two main nutrients. Those are the pollutants that in H2 Ohio we're most concerned about. Overall, generally, just the fact that wetlands suck up water, store water, that helps them store lots of different things that are being carried by that water. And the two that I want to talk about are nitrogen and phosphorus. If you're a gardener, you might know these as the fertilizer that you might use to help your tomatoes get a little bigger. Everything needs them to grow, but when they get into places like Lake Erie, it's too much of a good thing, and the algae really love them and grow and sometimes makes toxins, which we don't want for health or recreation. In a wetland, phosphorus doesn't ever turn into a gas, so we just try to store it in a wetland. A lot of phosphorus is stuck to the sediment that water can carry. And so just by slowing that water down and trapping all that sediment, the phosphorus can get trapped. Plants also take it up. So when you see lush plants growing in wetlands, they're doing a lot of work storing both the nitrogen and the phosphorus. And then the one kind of phosphorus, phosphate, is really sticky. So it sticks to soils. And so that's the third way that wetlands remove phosphorus. With nitrogen, it's even a little easier with wetlands because there are bacteria in the soil that can turn that available nitrogen that would otherwise drive algal blooms into a gas, an inert gas that's surrounding us all the time. Nitrogen gas makes up most of the atmosphere. So what's interesting is it's different biological processes, geochemical processes, physical processes for all the other pollutants you might be interested in. And so that's part of why we do a lot of research into how wetlands work, because even though they can be really effective kidneys, if you want them to do one specific thing, there's things you can do to kind of tweak them that direction and get maybe more bang for your buck, especially if the price tag for that wetland restoration is high.
We've got a note in from Claudia in Kent. Claudia wants to know if anyone on the panel is familiar with the book Fen, Bog, and Swamp, A Short History of Peatland Destruction and Its Role in the Climate Crisis. Anybody have familiarity with this? David, Lauren, Meredith? Maybe not. So Claudia writes on, she wants to let people know about this. She adds cultural dimension, having researched the history of wetlands as viewed by different peoples. And Claudia says it's a fascinating read, so a recommendation for anyone who might be interested there. I want to read a note from Marvin, who writes in, beavers are one of nature's wetland managers. Places where expert humans have failed to restore a wetland can be returned to normal very quickly when beavers are reintroduced. And we've got just a couple minutes here, and so I want to ask everyone, what's a favorite species? What kind of animal should we be looking for in the wetlands? Meredith, is there something particularly you enjoy spotting in the wetlands?
Gosh, there's so many things. We definitely have beavers back here in Medina, and so they help to maintain our wetlands. So that's kind of one of my favorites. I also love to tell people that barred owls love to eat frogs. So while they're not living in the wetlands, they do depend on the wetland for one of their food sources. So those are probably my top two.
All right. Lauren, how about for you?
Well, I love great blue herons and I love dragonflies, but as a soil but mud biologist, I have to put in a plug for the microbial life that lives in wetland mud. So if you see like bright orange and it looks kind of slimy, many people think that's gross. I love it. That is a thriving biological activity that is doing all sorts of interesting things with the iron in the soil.
Okay, good to know that. And David, for you?
I love that one. That's hard to trump. I like the secretive marsh birds, the rails and bitterns. Thin as a rail, they make the craziest sound. Another reason why these wetlands have bad raps, because you go in there and you hear these absolutely bizarre sounds. So rails and bitterns.
All right, I'm putting everyone on the spot. I want to know your recommendation for going through a hike or stroll in the wetlands. Meredith, I'll start with you.
Gosh, I would say my recommendations are to slow down and take your time. Try to observe everything that you can, from the plants to the animals. Look up in the trees that surround the wetlands, as well as down on the surface of the water.
Do you have a favorite
And
spot,
you're
Meredith, to go?
um, I mean, it might be biased, but my favorite spot is here at Owen-Slugger Nature Center, because we have the Beaver Lodge. We have a lot of different types of wildlife down there that you can view at just about any time of the year.
Okay.
Lots of cool stuff to see.
Thank you. We're in the speed round now, so Lauren, I have to ask you quickly, what's your favorite spot to go?
I love the Beaver Marsh in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park.
All right, there we go. And David, for you?
Menor Marsh.
Menor Marsh. Okay. I want to thank our panel for participating with us in the conversation today. David Kriska from the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. Thanks so much, David.
Great to be here.
Meredith Tian from the Medina County Parks District. Meredith, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And Lauren Kinsman Costello from Kent State University. Lauren, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.